Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Loving the greenery in the background.
Greenery. Oh, and we've got cats.
Oh, and wow, a cat tree.
We have trees and a cat tree.
Oh, fantastic. Oh,
They're
wow.
actually plastic. They're not real cats. Some people have Christmas trees, and we have a cat tree.
How you doing?
I'm doing quite good, actually. Our whole house is basically at various stages of some sort of end of term cold thing. But I just made a point of going to do exercise in the park, and actually, I do feel like it is holding it at bay. So I feel all right, actually.
Oh, did you go for a run, or were you kind of chin upping?
Chin upping. A combination of all of those. A little sort of circuit training in the park thing. Bit of running, well, not actually chin upping, but variation.
I'm imagining like one finger press.
You imagine an extremely strong person looking powerful in the park. That's about the size of it.
I got images of Rocky running up a whole flight of steps.
Exactly.
Like hundreds of people following him going.
Exactly. That's it. If you'd gone out to get a sandwich mere 40 minutes ago, you would have seen that through the streets of Hove.
Oh, energizing. Right. Okay.
How are you?
I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Actually, right now, just suddenly
hungry for life.
Hungry for life. I was thinking about having lunch, but I just don't know what to eat. I'm hungry, but I don't know what it is. So, what do I have? A sandwich? No, I don't want any bread. Do I have a nice salad? Can't be asked making one. Do I go?
So after this, I've got to go to a carol concert for half an hour, and then I'm just going to go get someone else to make me a salad.
Very good. Well done.
Thanks.
Yeah, maybe I should do something similar.
Yeah.
I was at a carol concert last night.
Oh, there we go.
And, it's St. Leonard's Church. Do you know it, on Church Road?
Yeah, the home of Third Hove Scouts.
Oh, is that right? Wonderful church. Amazing, beautiful structure, beautiful inside.
Yeah. Well, actually,
we've been there.
The hall is the home rather than the church. That would be weird.
Nice hall. Really good setup. Lovely place. Definitely feeling the Christmas vibe.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Why don't we kick this off?
Let's get the show on the road.
Steph, I see, is live with us.
Who? What?
Or Steph Gray, or he's just got it like sitting in the background.
Live in the back.
So please say hi. And Fraser just joined as well. Please say hi in the chat if you're that way inclined. Let us know how you're feeling at this time of year, as we're in approaching the end. And you were doing your shiver time yesterday.
Yes, we did.
How was it?
It was good, actually. It was really good. It's basically just, the importance of ending things well and having a little reflect back on the year, and with a little bit of burn away what is no longer necessary to create some good space for growing the right things in 2024. I enjoyed it.
And did you come away with any new revelations, epiphanies? Did you take part?
I didn't actually take part, no. I was trying to do that thing of driving Zoom a little bit at the same time. So I didn't actually do the ceremony yesterday, although I did do half of it today. And some of the reflecting back. But no, I wasn't really able to sort of do it at the same time as hosting, mainly trying to drive breakout rooms.
Well, of course. Yeah. It's hard to take part when you're trying to make sure everyone's going in the same direction.
Or at least a direction.
It's quite that idea. Well, this Friday I'm talking to Dougal Hine.
Yes. Yes.
Who you already interviewed. And what I'm getting from his book is this idea of hospicing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Have
yeah,
you come? Have you know? Because there was like 2 or 3, which we'll probably talk about on Friday, books I think, which kind of really sort of prompted him to write his book, and one of them is the book Hospicing Modernity. Have you come across
yeah.
that?
I
Um,
haven't come across it. I've discovered it through the book and also through his conversations with the author, and I'm very curious about what that means, because I do like bits of modernity.
well, so in the Vanessa D'Oliveira, however you say her name, in her
Yeah.
thing, her thing is pretty full on. Actually, it's quite an intense thing, and she has a whole big thing at the beginning, like this book is not for you if, right? So, and
Okay.
you're in if.
Yeah, because
Of
and
which
maybe this
most
is
people are, of course, right?
yeah. Well, that's it. That's it. And for those of you who are wondering what we're talking about in terms of modernity, I don't think we have enough time to even dive into that. But it feels like it touches on some of the stuff that I'm not struggling with. I'm trying to position because, and I just want to say hi to Danny who just joined, and someone called deleted user who's posted a message. They've prepared as me as deleted user.
That's me.
Yeah, they said, "How could I miss the last ever hyperpricing episode?" Well, thank you very much for joining us as we hospice.
Deleted.
we hospice the well, no, not hospice. I think we're just putting hibernating, happy pricing. But in terms of this whole hospicing modernity, the way I connect it to this capitalism and the structures that have brought the way we live into being. So I'm sitting with this thing like, yeah, I'm really interested and curious about what it means to sell stuff, price stuff, build a business within this current system. And at the same time, as I'm learning, this system isn't necessarily fit for purpose anymore.
Yeah.
Or has brought us to a place where actually we need to find another way to move forward.
Yeah. Because the hospicing modernity idea, the Vanessa thing, it sort of started with her being. I'm pretty sure we're talking about something completely different now, but it's interesting. So whatever. It started with her being.
Pricing.
It started with her being asked to give a talk at a conference about the future of education, and her reflection was, "What the fuck? A future of education? Like, what is education really?" And so she said, I think this was all sort of leading up to the time around the pandemic, and she said that she would only do it if she had freedom to kind of run it as she would. And so she started it with a thought experiment, which is imagining this, this conference is happening, I think, in 2046. And so what might be going on in 2046 as a way of kind of working backwards. And the scenario that she paints for what might be going on in 2046, having sort of joined some threads up to today, is a pretty shocking scenario of, a kind of radically reduced global population. I think like radically, and like all of these kind of threads that go back to today, which actually seem really, really plausible when you kind of sort of stitch everything kind of back. And so her thing was, well, look, what would the kind of future of education, what would we be debating if it was 2046 based on these hypotheses playing out? And so it's a pretty kind of full-on intensive read. And she does kind of make, kind of unapologetically at the beginning say, look, really, this is quite full on and intense. And it's not going to be for you if, these ABC, these kind of things. But it is quite a sort of, intense and shocking thing.
So if you really love your grande chai lattes, really,
they're fine. Don't worry about that. They were the drink of choice in 2046. Okay. While they were at their conference.
Well, if you're interested in Vanessa Machado de Oliveira and her book about hospicing modernity, and you are feeling quite resilient and strong.
And interestingly, Dougal Voices speaks the book for on Audible.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. He's got a wonderful reading voice. I think I'll have to take part. Oh, well, yeah, download that one. Okay, Right. So with the
Not sticking. I've now got 14 minutes until the carol service. No, not 14.
Exactly.
I can't count. 24.
24 minutes. Okay. So having started off with the slow decline of late stage capitalism and thinking about how we structure society in a more connected way, we're gonna talk about late stage happy pricing and what it means for the future. So yeah, what we thought we'd do is as a way to close well, to honor the work that we've been doing now. But is it 3 years that we've been doing this stuff?
It might well be, yeah.
3 years. I thought it'd be useful just to talk to how this all came about.
Yeah.
What how it started. So for people who maybe just have an idea, thinking about creating something new, how does how does this all work? And we can talk to our journey of building this thing, and then how sometimes things have its time, and making a conscious decision to bring something to a close.
Yeah.
And so celebrating, and I just realized there's 50 episodes of the Happy
50, because every time we start this, you would come up with this random number about Series 8, thingy, this, that, the other. But now we're on actually like a round number.
Yeah, it is now. The big 50, which is ironic given it's also my 50th year, your 50th year.
Fucking hell, is like
this. You couldn't have planned this. Yeah, this is destiny. This is life just unfolding, and us just surrendering to what comes out. So let's start with what have you enjoyed over this past 50 episode sprint or marathon?
Well, I very much enjoyed this random free-flowing talk, sort of loosely hitched to the pole of pricing.
Well, yes, and I think that's, for me, talks to an idea of just like having a focus, but not being so constrained by it, and to be able to talk to something that a lot of people we know struggle with and are working with and trying to get better at, but also bringing the wider context of this work, and how it gets is impacted by and impacts on not just the business side of things, but the personal stuff. And I have really enjoyed just the exploratory aspect of it. Hi, Marcia. Thank you for joining us. She's just joining from the US. Thank you for saying hello. It feeds, for me, it feeds the soul. So it allows me feeds my need for variety and curiosity, while also having quite a clear purpose. And that's something that I've really enjoyed. And also just to be able to do it in a way that's just chilled and relaxed, not overly serious.
Yeah,
not taking ourselves too seriously, which I think it makes it feel a bit more accessible to people.
Yeah.
And so for those of you who might come across this podcast episode now, or just jumping on the Crowdcast now because you just randomly found us on LinkedIn, please go to podcast.happypricing.co and you will see a whole load of stuff there, where the core of it is around helping people just navigate this idea of pricing their work and pricing their worth. But we also go on a kind of a random journey of consciousness around it as well, to give it, I think, a bit more context, so that you can own some of this knowledge a bit more and bring it home. I hope.
Yeah, and I kind of do. It's always a kind of pleasure to have the kind of random conversation with someone, and they say, "Oh, I was listening to your podcast whilst insert here, walking the dog,
doing the dishes,
having
a snooze,
writing a proposal, going to sleep."
And on that note, if you are listening live, please type in the chat, what are you doing right now? Because if you are just listening to it, thank you, but maybe you're also washing the car, doing the shopping, or something else,
or hospicing.
Hospicing modernity. So what is it do you think, is there anything that you've learned from doing this, from doing the podcast, and also with the course that we've
Is there
run
anything
three
I've
times, I
learned?
think?
Well, yeah, I would say I've kind of learned lots of things. So you mean like about just generally any things I've learned?
Yeah, anything that you from this, well, hopefully you could attribute to us sitting here 50 times.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say I've learned lots of things. I've learned the importance of sort of consistently sort of doing something makes it easier to think about it. The importance of consistently doing something if you are in the business somewhat of running a course or kind of offering a course to people. So kind of, just the super kind of practical things around that, the relationship between those two things. Yeah, so I guess the sort of the importance of consistently doing something, the importance of the kind of opportunity of consistently talking about something definitely is a kind of good way of sort of learning about it and exploring it further. So I definitely would say get that from some of the things kind of learned from doing it. I think also, I think you kind of made reference to either in the chat before or the kind of beginning, understanding how this came about a little bit. And so there's definitely an element of kind of what I've learned, which is linked to how this came about, certainly from kind of my side, which actually goes all the way back to 2020 when I did 2020 in 2020, because obviously that was the only time really to do 2020 in the year of 2020. But when I was doing that, listening to a conversation on there, and I can't remember who it was you and somebody else, and they were saying, oh, I know what the thing I need to do is I need to get the stuff that's in my head out of my head in order to create some space for new things to kind of grow. And that really resonated with me at the time of trying to sort of unpick some of the work that I was doing. And so, talking about this, some of these kind of practical things which come up in the running of companies, which is really what I sort of knew a lot about. I thought, oh, well, let's start just getting that out of my head somewhat. It will create space in time for new things to bubble up. And so in coming back to the question in the sense of kind of what I've kind of learned, really having explored this sort of topic in quite, a lot of detail and how it relates to selling and how it relates to our relationship to money and how it relates to a lot of the things which sort of, a lot of these things are, pricing and writing proposals and conversations we might have when we're selling. These are all kind of things in a way which are sort of a bit, above the line. They're the kind of visible things that we see in the running of our business. And I think one of the things that I've kind of really learned and enjoyed sort of exploring and letting reveal somewhat, which is, of course, is much more the relationship between then what we don't see, what's kind of going on under the skin, under the surface of our kind of hearts and minds, which might be shaping and affecting that. So I think that whole kind of, that's been a kind of big part of the learning for me over the course of talking about these things and spending time with the topic has been the kind of revealing of that too.
Yeah, I'd echo that as well. The word depth is what comes to mind, and in a sense, there's a practical side for me. There's this need for contribution that I have, and I feel like being able to learn from you and then share that learning with other people, and having people be able to use that knowledge around, just thinking about pricing in a different way that isn't finger in the air or isn't filled with trepidation, or is informed, I would say, an informed way of doing pricing. That's been really helpful and also really rewarding to then see people say, oh God, I never thought about it that way, and to actually put it to practice. And like our friend Jim, to have been able to use what he learned just by coming onto the podcast with us to then build what will sound like a good runway of work for himself through looking at pricing in a different way when he's writing proposals. That's been lovely. But also what it's helped me understand is like, actually, I'm more interested in the other stuff. That deeper stuff, the stuff, because it feels like the tactics and strategies are everywhere, but they feel a bit groundless because I've observed at very least, many people can understand the concepts, but don't necessarily execute because of something else.
Yeah.
And that being, from my understanding, is a whole myriad of things as well that people bring to the table. That isn't just unified. All right, I just need to know how to put more options in the way I
Mm.
price, or
Mhm.
I just need to talk to my customers. And sometimes the reason I don't want to talk,
Mm.
or I'm scared of talking, and what's behind that. And then, like one of the things we ask on the course at the very beginning, what will more money buy you? Is like even just being able to express what do I want?
Mm.
Where is it I'm trying to get to with all of this stuff,
Mhm.
or all of this knowledge? And so, yeah, on that, what has emerged for you then in terms of other curiosities, other things that you want to explore because of
Mm.
this work, and getting this stuff out of your head? Now it's out there. It feels like it's created space for stuff that's, yeah, I don't know, growing some roots.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think roots is a good word, a right word. I think, like you very much. I'm much more interested in the depth. I'm much more interested in all of the kind of stuff which is kind of unseen and silently choreographing and shaping what we do. Like, you're talking about in the context of this. And I think the kind of journey of doing this podcast has been then the kind of opportunity to sort of explore that. But yeah, so similar to you, I'm interested in the depth. I think, clearly we were talking at the beginning about the whole thing around hospicing modernity and the bigness of that. And I guess it kind of feels increasingly to me. I think it's over the 3 years that we've been doing this, kind of for me personally, like kind of bubbling around in the background is a kind of this sort of idea, exploration, inquiry around Buddha on the board and what that might mean. And I think in a sense, to the extent that that sort of means anything, it kind of just feels like clearly we are at a point where, I think sort of understanding a bit more about, some of the depth, understanding what some of the kind of drivers and influences might be, which remaining unseen, which are kind of shaping what we do and affecting how we turn up in the world. I think, helping people get to a place of a bit more kind of brave, a bit more kind of fearless, a bit more kind of revolutionary leadership in a sense, kind of feels like a lot of the work for me, which has been bubbling out of our time of exploring this, exploring all the kind of pricing stuff. And I think the sort of the kind of frame of the podcast as a kind of place of continually talking and turning up has been a kind of, like we're talking about at the beginning, has been a kind of pole around which some of those things can kind of ferment a little bit.
Hmm. I'm curious about this now. This phrase you said, revolutionizing leadership.
Mm.
What does that mean to you now?
Well, I think it's more rather than revolutionizing leadership. I think just clearly living in a time of a bit more revolutionary leaders. So kind of leaders a bit kind of more radically brave to start to do things in a very different way. Because the idea of business as usual, as much as we might like the kind of chai latte or whatever we were sort of talking about, the kind of idea of business as usual clearly isn't a thing which can sustain. So in some form, we exist in a time which is kind of needing, and I think people kind of wanting a bit more kind of radical leadership. I was talking to somebody just about the kind of politics of the time, the earlier on. And it, in a sense, I think, there's just a lack of real clear, what by some definition would be called radical or revolutionary ideas, but actually they're just in a sense kind of talking to the time that we live in, talking to the need for a bit more bravery and a bit more change, and how it is that you kind of help people step into that space is one of the things I'm curious about.
Yeah, the word bravery rings out for me. On one hand, because I feel like when we talk, when we're talking about pricing and we're helping people with pricing, it's usually because they need to charge more. They're
Mm.
feeling scared because their business is in threat, and they're needing to work out how can I create more safety. Again, we talk about the money stories and how money can feel like safety, and trying to um, create this kind of sense that everything's going to be okay.
Mm.
While at the same time, to do that, they have to really step out of their comfort zone. They have to turn up a bit differently, and that can be a massive step for many people because
Mm.
it's going into a new way of doing things. And so I'm caught with this idea of transitioning. How we transition in a way where it doesn't. We don't necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater, but
Mm.
we um, Yeah, we keep the stuff that's helpful while creating new stuff that is needed.
Yeah.
Are you able to connect that to, people's ways of navigating this different way of working with money, different way of working with their businesses? I don't know. I'm just trying to see
Mm.
how, yeah, or have some kind of tenuous link to this journey of happy pricing, but then this bravery, trying to think of doing things more radically, more differently. Just curious
Um,
what might come up.
yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean, I guess the one of the things which was coming to mind as you were talking there was, for example, like all of the work, say that Case Klump was talking about at summer camp, for example, and the work that he does, which is similar to the guy Charles Eisenstein, which is all about the story, underlying story in a sense, and that if there is going to be some kind of meaningful, brave change, whatever it might be, it's because there's a change that happens in terms of at the story level, in terms of the worldview level, in terms of how we talk about and understand our place in the world. And this is quite a tenuous link, but I'm going to go with it anyway. But it kind of feels to me it's at the story level, isn't it? Which is where I think, when we, for me, when we're both talking about the kind of importance of depth or what's kind of happening a little bit below the surface. For me, a lot of that is about the story which is bubbling under the surface, the story that sits behind why we tell us, why we do the things that we do, or why we tell ourselves about how, or why we do the things that we do. And in a sense, the kind of the need and the opportunity is to change that story somewhat. And the interesting thing for me is that a lot of what comes out of the kind of all of this sort of pricing work, as you were pointing to, actually the tools and tactics is up here. It's the kind of top thing. Where it hits, where it either unlocks or doesn't unlock, is because there is a shift in the story which sits underneath. And so I guess in terms of the kind of most tenuous kind of link, I think that's why, in a sense, I'm interested in those stories underneath changing and what that kind of reveals and the opportunity that opens up. And I think that is true whether we see that in the the kind of practical stuff around money and pricing in our business, but it is true, of course, just then also on a system-wide thing too.
Yeah, and I think I'm very much with you on that, because there are the stories that we have around money that then affect how we use money, and that's at a personal level because of experiences in our childhood or experiences earlier in life. And then there's the stories of this system of money.
Yeah.
And the need to have this system in place, and why these financial systems, this capitalist system, these societal systems are there, what's holding them up. And when you talk about revolutionary way of doing things, or radical way of doing things, I think it's Einstein's, you can't use the same thinking that got you here to get you to somewhere else. And to change that thinking, it does mean first being aware of what those stories are, which is the thing I'm learning through Dougal's work. I'm now curious about Vanessa's work. What are the stories that human beings had that came up? And there's another book that I read a while ago called The Patterning Instinct that talks about the difference between Eastern culture and Western culture, and how cultures have evolved to then create these systems. That's so tightly connected that it kind of feels as though they're all, it's always been like this. When in fact, there's at the root, there's a story. And I think this is what I'm learning here, is like, I'm always in search of that little pivot point, that little switch, that lever, that if you just flick that, the ripple effects can be quite impactful and hopefully beneficial, because you just shifted a perspective, a story, an attitude. And whether that's at a tactical level about, I have that story about money, and that's why I find it difficult to even ask for more money, to a story about, so this whole need to own my house, or have this beautiful car, or look accomplished or successful, that's based on another story. And that for me is the interesting, deeper work.
Yeah. And there are you were talking, Jeremy Lent, who wrote that book, The Pattern Instinct, and another book called The Web of Meaning, which is a brilliant book to read. And I spoke to Jeremy on my other podcast as well, and it's because I think I'm kind of interested in all of this and the extent to which there are kind of levers. There was a sort of quote somewhere that somebody said it was easier to imagine the end of the world than it was the end of capitalism. Like these things, it seems so kind of set in a way. And it seems so fixed that it is kind of difficult to imagine. But like how how change works, and Jeremy Lent talks about that a lot, actually, just from a system perspective. How change works, and actually, when change comes, there is, in a sense, there is a lever, there is something which kind of pops open, and things ripple out from that very, very quickly in some instances. And those things are, often surprising, and they are unseen, and they're a bit kind of unpredictable. But it's kind of, whether it's Jeremy's or Dougal's, because a lot of what he's talking to in there, which will be a great conversation on Friday, is around that, is around this idea of kind of embracing the ending, essentially.
What came up for me as well, also having read Dougal's book, and this invitation for artists and creatives to tell us a different story, or their perspective on this. This idea of allowing ourselves to dream of a different way, and being able to let go of how whatever's around you, to just see what new ways, creative ways, we could look at our work, our world, how we want to do things, not be conditioned so much by the conventional ways of doing things.
Yeah, I spoke to somebody else on my podcast, a writer called Richard Wayne, and he has just written a book which is called Through the Brink is the Beginning, or something like that. I need to double check. Anyway, part of the inspiration for that book was somebody else whose name I can't remember, whose work is all around kind of getting people to think about what if, not what is, which is exactly to the point you're talking about there. If we come at things from what if, what if I lived by sharing kind of sort of things I have with neighbours, rather than what is, it does kind of open up a realm of possibility much more. Can be a much more sort of inspiring place to be, a much more hopeful place to be, rather than kind of being too much kind of bogged down in the kind of what is of kind of fear and all the rest of it.
So on that note, bringing us to a close, what's your what if for 2024? Do you have any what ifs that are sort of emerging, or maybe even just slightly hazy in the distance? Or what ifs after the podcast, this podcast? We're putting, gently cocooning happy pricing in a little bed, a nest of hay. What if? What's the what if next for you?
In a sense, a what if in the relationship to the kind of podcast is, because part of the kind of cocooning, happy pricing for me, is about kind of creating some sort of space, in a sense. And in that space, I would think I would like to, populate that with kind of ever more kind of braver, radical contributions to the world, which help wake people up, and which help people, think about the context of their day-to-day in a kind of ever different way. So in a sense, a kind of what if possibility, as this kind of little podcast series, or big podcast series actually, which is what it is, as this big podcast series is kind of sort of got a little bow on it to put it to sleep for a while. It creates a what if space to kind of much more bravely and boldly, to borrow Francis's brilliant phrase, kind of much more bravely and boldly, kind of make some new contributions to the world.
Yeah, I like that. I think it has been this journey has kind of been like a little bit of an incubator for many ideas. It's opened my world up to not just now, I've got a totally different perspective of pricing, but then thinking about the money stories, thinking about also what that means in terms of how we turn up and what we want, how we want to change things, and working within this system, but then also wanting to change it somehow for the better. Yeah, that what if of what if we could dream up our new ways of working that didn't hold us back. Well, we wasn't held back by the current systems or current constraints. What would that mean? Not only for the real world, but for me, really.
Yeah, and I guess an important sort of useful reminder. And I've got to go to a carol concert. That was not the reminder, but the important useful reminder is we are also the system, which I know Case was talking about at summer camp. Another great a woman called Phoebe Tickle who does some brilliant work around cyber. Do you know her? But it's real kind of just useful reminder. We are the system. We are part of it. You know, the system isn't something out there that I change. We are nodes in the system. We are agents. We are players. We are actors in the system too. And in a sense, that's also quite an empowering idea. Like I can just obviously control what I do, how I change, how I turn up, and then trust that the ripple effects of that are what they are.
Yeah, awesome, lovely. Well, I'll let you get on to your carol concert. Thank you very much for joining us and being part of this. Let us create these ripple effects.
Yeah, and thank you,
Carlos. I loved it, and I really appreciated it. And yeah, maybe we will come back, Francis, as a science program of systems physics, metaphysics, and radical leadership.
Exactly.
Awesome. Right, you take care.
Thank you
very much, everyone. And
Bye.